All right, here we go. It is Friday, May 9th, 2025. I think I'm going to continue somewhat with that same format, how I'm doing, how I'm feeling before I jump into what I accomplished for the week or what I really dove into, what I was sort of navigating, and then kind of finally getting to, what's next, right? What do I still need to process? One thing I might add, I had a couple of friends, or actually I got a few people that pinged me and asked me to go a little bit deeper on some things, right? So some things that might not necessarily be just the things that I touched on in the week, but actually having some topics that they might be able to learn a little bit more from. So I think I might be able to add that sort of at the end. I'll try to still keep these somewhat nice and short. Reminder: this is sort of unscripted, and so apologies if I repeat myself a couple of times. For that topic, I think for today, a couple of people actually asked me about franchising in general, and from watching some of these videos, they weren't aware that the process from their side was also to root out a bunch of people, right? I think some people maybe believe that with the franchise concept that they're just selling and they want as many people as they can to start opening up a lot of their locations. And I think that's probably true for some franchises. I've seen that. I've seen the way they advertise. I've talked to a few people that, they get one person that looks like they've got some money and they look like they're somewhat capable of, starting a business, and they get super excited and they want to run with that. But some of the concepts, especially the ones that I'm talking to now, are very, very selective, and they'll easily turn people away that they don't think are at the right caliber or are going to represent their brand or their company in the best way. So let's jump in. Okay, let's go with how I'm feeling. So same, similar feelings as I've been sort of navigating, probably since I was impacted, and the stress, the doubt, all of that stuff. I've already touched on it a little bit, so not going to get too deep into that. But it is a bit of a roller coaster, right? And again, it just depends on who I'm talking to, what I'm watching, what I'm hearing. There's a lot of little things that kind of pop up that just feels like, man, like really, really, are you doing the right thing? And I'll probably keep saying that every week, right, until things are really in a good place. I just got to be prepared that I will continue to sort of have those feelings and those emotions. But at the end of the day, I just kind of remind myself again of like, hey, you got to suck it up, right? Focus on what you can control. For me, that's really making sure that I have a well thought out plan, right? And my plan is built around information, right? And I think that's the phase that I'm still sort of in now, is just gathering as much information as I can so that I can ultimately sort of make that right decision. And if I can create a really, really well thought out plan, the better the plan, obviously. And I got to keep iterating on the plan or the plans each week. And then hopefully, if I get to a point where I feel like, man, okay, now perhaps this plan or these plans are about as bulletproof as they're going to get, right? Then it's time to execute. So I'm doing all right. Okay, let's see. We're going to start with the usual, right? So the stock market, the S&P 500 year to date. I mean, that's generally what most people and myself would look at is to determine how the market is doing. We're down 3.5% for the year. That is not that bad, although it is May, so obviously everybody would like to be higher. But considering we were just about a month ago when we were below 10%, it feels pretty good to get back up. This week, the last week was relatively flat, but no drop isn't necessarily a bad thing. So nothing major to report here. The last Airbnb property that we picked up, we got that one. We got that one up and ready super quick, and I think I mentioned that we were able to reuse a lot, if not all, of the furniture from a prior property that we sold, and so that one got up quick, and we have our first guest checking in today. They're staying through, I think, Monday, and so hopefully there's no issues there. But I guess we'll find out next week. Um, don't think I touched too much on the long term and the car rental assets that we have. That's probably a good thing. If I'm not bringing it up, then probably no issues. I'm just mentioning it now to say that they're still there, but there's no issues. So that also helps relieve some of that stress. Okay, the boutique resort. It's It's starting to get real, although I shouldn't say that because I've probably said that every week, but it's definitely getting to the point where we thought we were closing today, right? We were closing escrow today. We presented the sellers with our sort of plans, right, for close of escrow with the tenants there. We did get them to agree this week. We're now just waiting for the wet signatures. And so the people that are selling this larger piece of land, they're a little bit on the older side, and so it's taking them a little bit longer to sort of go through some of these things. But essentially, the agreement is we will take this property on. I believe we're closing on Tuesday, and there are actually still two tenants on the property. They both have their own RVs there, and once we take over the property, technically they become our responsibility. Part of the original agreement was that they had to get us this property vacant, right? We don't want to inherit something that could inherently cause a lot of problems down the road. So the agreement is we're going to hold back 50% of the deposit. That's a very large amount until the tenants are gone. We are also not going to start the terms of the seller financing, so the mortgage of this property, until those tenants are gone too. So my partners and I, we've almost joked a little bit where, okay, then maybe it's in our best interest to keep one of those tenants there longer, maybe wine and dine them, and then we'll ultimately delay the process. But again, that's more so for us just to think about how the sellers now still have skin in the game, while the responsibility mainly falls on us. If those tenants aren't gone, then the sellers don't get their money. So there's incentive for them to work through that. And then, of course, there are some additional things that we got to think through, like any sort of legal process if people don't want to leave or if something else happens because of this. And so the sellers have also agreed that they would handle any legal cost or fees associated with this. So hopefully I'll have a nice update about this next week. So all right, let's jump into the new business. Obviously, that's the main bulk of all of the things that I'm sort of navigating through. I'll just start quickly with PerTech. I'm trying to think if last week I was in a similar spot where I hadn't really had any updates, and it sounds like, well, it doesn't sound like I did hear from the franchise developer, and they were at a conference in Vegas last week, so they weren't really able to do anything. I was kind of like, well, you still could have sent me an email with some next steps or what was going to happen. Either way, they got back to me this morning, and I have a call for Monday now scheduled with them, as well as their boss. It's a 30-minute call. Probably it's going to be some sort of a get to know their boss, and maybe the boss wants to either do some light selling and or perhaps a pseudo sort of light interview just to kind of get a feel for who I am and what I'm about, to see if it makes sense to sort of move me forward in the process. So we'll see how that call goes. I have been very interested in PerTech, right? I think some of those main things that I probably shared a lot about is that's the one that I feel is the most recession sort of resistant, right? And I think I mentioned too that during COVID, the government labeled that as a required business to stay open. And so that's something that I really like. It is adding a tremendous value for the community. You're doing something really positive. It's something that is needed, which I think is something that I can really get behind. Now, having said that, they're moving a little bit slower, which I think is okay, but right, time kills all deals, and now I'm feeling like there's a couple of other things that have sped things up, and that they're moving, and so hopefully it doesn't mean that I sort of start losing a little bit of interest, but we'll see. I'm really trying to keep an open mind here. But let's get to FCI, which now has added a little bit more of a curveball, right? The prior curveball was that we were going to be moving to Fresno, but with FCI, they don't have territories available in Fresno. I would pretty much be required to cancel those plans and move back to the Bay Area. Well, today, and I prepped a lot for this, but I had an interview, a little bit over an hour interview with the senior VP of operations for FCI. FCI, they are very serious about making sure that it's the right fit from their sort of terms. And this is something similar that maybe when I get into the franchising stuff a little bit more, there's a lot of these sort of more established brands and established concepts where they're looking for empire builders, right? They're not interested in this one person that's going to come in and open up one shop and that's all they do, right? They would, of course, rather have one strong person or even a strong team of people that would come in and continue to just build and grow and scale and own multiple territories, multiple businesses, multiple shops, since rinse and repeating is likely, something that if you do really well with one, there's a good chance you're going to do really well with the second, right? So it's a much higher likelihood that I'm going to be successful, and if they find people that they can take and sign on to multiple territories that are going to grow with them, that's of course going to be a really, really good thing for their bottom line. So anyways, I was very prepared for this interview. Turns out this guy, super good guy, very, very sort of approachable, I could tell. We had a really good conversation, and quickly I think it turned into more sort of conversational. We tended to agree on a lot of things, and even as he asked questions, it was very easy for me to answer questions. Not so much in a way that I think he wanted them answered, but just really the way that I approach things and the way that I think about things. And so I came away feeling pretty confident that like what they're looking for and what, maybe not so much what I'm looking for, but what they're looking for is somebody that probably approaches things in a way that I would approach things. And so from their end, I was pretty confident that they were going to want to move forward. So I felt good. Right after that call, I did a follow-up call with the franchise developer that I've been working with throughout the whole process. It was maybe 5-10 minutes after the other interview ended, and he was super excited because he had already jumped on the phone. I guess he got a phone call right away from the senior VP, who gave a quick download. The senior VP had a rubric. It was a pretty long rubric with a bunch of different categories on what they look for, and then within those categories, there were a bunch of different line items where I guess they're giving a score of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, meaning that's a good match, or that's a trait or a skill or something like that they would look for. And so this guy was pretty excited because he kept showing me my score, and so pretty quickly he was just like, "Look, no, we're super excited about you. I think something they've talked about before could be a tactic, right, to make you feel good, which could just be that, hey, we're not just going to give away super large territories to someone that we don't have experience with. Problem there is, again, if they don't really know if you're going to work out well, do they really want to give away a lot of real estate, a lot of territories? If you don't do well, even with your first one, but you're sitting on 2 or 3 territories, then that prevents somebody else from coming in. With FCI specifically, when they talk about territories, which could be very different from, some sort of a restaurant concept or a spa, which you could likely have one of those, every 5 miles or so. The territories that FCI is speaking to are multiple cities. So for example, I think I shared before the territories that we're now looking at in the Bay Area. One territory alone would be all of Livermore, all of Pleasanton, all of Dublin, and I think all of Hayward, and perhaps 1 or 2 more cities in there. So it's a pretty large territory. So then you factor in if someone's going to come in and take 2 or even 3 territories, that's a lot of real estate for them to give up to an unknown. Well, either way, they were pretty excited because they said, "Hey, look, if you wanted 3, we would allow you to start off with 3 territories." Why would somebody want to take on 3 right away versus, well, wait a minute, if I don't even know if I'm going to be successful or not at this, why would I go and sign up for 3 territories, which technically by contract, now there's an additional timeline, meaning, and all of the franchises are going to do this, right? So you have 1 territory, you have very specific time frame of the training you go through, very specific dates locked down for when your grand opening needs to be, and then you need you have a pretty quick timeline of how you're going to get to a certain revenue number, or how many employees you're going to hire, or something like that. Well, if you sign up for 2 territories, then automatically it's you got to get your first one up as quickly as possible. Then there's a timeline of how quickly you get your second one open. So again, and then you have to pay for that up front, not to open, but the territory. So with FCI, I'll throw the number out there. I think their initial cost is $50,000 to just lock in, purchase 1 territory, right? There's other territories I've seen that are $35,000, $55,000, $60,000. So they're usually not that cheap, right? I mean, to me, I mean, spending $50,000, $40,000 to get a territory, that's just a fee that goes to them for allowing you to partner with them. That's outside of all the royalties and all the other fees that they charge you. So it's a big upfront cost. If you go with a second territory, well, then you got to pay that second territory fee right off the bat. If you go third territory, then again, you got to pay that upfront as well. So it's a big cost. It's a big investment from your side. Now there are some discounts they'll give there. I think FCI is actually, I think it was 50 for the first one and then 40 for the second, 40 for the third. Well, then why would I want to do three right off the bat if I don't even know if I'm going to be successful with the first one? Well, are you going to scale? The last thing I want to do, or the last thing I would think anybody would want to do, especially if they're trying to grow and scale their business for the long term, you don't want to get one territory, especially when you're spending money on advertisement, local style advertisement that you want for your territory. But technically, if you don't move fast enough, somebody else comes in and buys the territory right next to you. Somebody else comes in and buys the territory on the other side of you. Now, probably some of your marketing, advertisement, brand, and some of that spend goes to contribute to some of those other owners. But even more so, how am I going to expand? If other people are buying up the real estate or the territories around me, then you're kind of putting yourself in a box, and it's going to be pretty hard to grow and scale the business. So, anyways, it was pretty exciting to hear that they're comfortable with me going 3 territories. So that felt pretty good. And then the curveball comes in. There was no curveball yet, right? The curveball was, and I had mentioned this, that there was a prior owner here that just wasn't delivering the way that they needed to. And so they're sort of, we'll say, being forced to sell. And it starts with, corporate selling the territories. They're not necessarily selling this owner's business, right? So I could essentially come in with a clean slate and just build everything from the ground up. Now, here's the curveball. They basically said that they have the prior owner has an office manager that precedes them. This office manager has been working for FCI in the area for 11 years, pretty much since the original owner first opened up at FCI and it was first brought to that area. And they are brand ambassador. They live and breathe FCI. They know all about the company. They know all about flooring. They know all of the installers. They know all about operations, how to handle appointments, how to talk to customers. It would take a really long time to hire somebody fresh off the street and try to build them up and get them to in a similar capacity. And so corporate now basically told me, look, you move forward, we're going to work, and they're already working with the COO behind the scenes to make sure that as soon as any word gets out about a new owner potentially coming in, because that's something they had the current owner sign NDAs and some other agreements that they're not allowed to go and talk about, this transition process that's happening. So long story short on this one, they're going to do everything in their power to transfer that person over to the new owner. So if I move forward here, I would be getting a veteran in the business here that would support this and work. So that would be a huge bonus. On top of that, they already have a built out office and warehouse, over 2,000 square feet. They've got a commercial, big roll up door in the back. They've got a forklift in the shop. They've got racks. They've got some inventory. They've got a little bit of a mini showroom in the front where the office is, that has street access where they actually have walk-in clients still coming in today. And essentially that office space, that building, all of the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, everything that's inside of there, except for the forklift, they would just hand it to me for free. Granted, I would have to pay the lease, of course, and sign an agreement, but I would save a ton of money on build-out cost and some of those initial samples and inventory and furniture, fixtures, and equipment that generally any new business owner is going to have to spend money on. So no hiring, training, cost associated with getting an office manager. That's a huge bonus. And then not having to pay. Sometimes there's fees even too, and how much time and effort you spend on trying to find the right place to be able to have your office and whatnot. And for them to just offer that at no cost, that is a huge, huge bonus. The Current owner has one mobile showroom, right? That's the van. That's a big piece of their business, is being able to drive around and bring their showroom to customers' homes. Um, it's a 2019 van, so not that old. I think they mentioned something like 30,000, 36,000 miles. They basically said I can take it if I want it at fair value. If I don't want it, no problem. Go lease my own or buy another one. Um, and then I think they said something like that's around less than $20,000 probably for that van. That's probably about a third of the cost if I wanted to go get a new one outfitted with all the racks and inventory and SKUs in there. And then there is the forklift. I think they said I could probably pick that one up for maybe $7,000, which also is a really, really good use, or a really good price, I should say. So that all seemed really, really good. Now, for the final cost of this and what's the impact of that, he actually walked me through the numbers and he showed me how if I didn't have that, if I actually came in and wanted to start 3 territories on my own without that, um, we came down to the savings here are probably somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000. So I have shared already that with like a Pertec, with a tier 2 starting, with no warehouse, no shop, right? I would still probably have to invest about $500,000. That's kind of what I was envisioning for going in to FCI. And now, and I specifically went and basically they told me, they're like, look, you're coming in here, we're going to give you all that stuff. You're still coming in, and I think even including if I buy the car and the forklift, I'm coming in at like the max they're saying is 350. They're saying comfortably you should be able to get this off the ground and hire people and get this going at 300. But even if you came in at 350, that'd be like, wow, you're coming in stronger than what they've seen other people come in at. And then I pressure test and I said, hey, what if I had another 50? Could that expedite? Could that fast track something? And they were like, at 350, you're already set to expedite and fast track everything as much as possible. So that now is very, very intriguing. Now again, flooring installations, not recession resistant. So that's the one thing now, dealing with the timing of everything. It's the one thing that I got to think a little bit about. Of course, that would change our plans and we would not go to Fresno anymore. So lots of things to think through. But man, I feel like the calls today were really good. That information, wow, it seems really, really good. So, okay, here's another curveball, another one. I've been telling you that I've been putting Slice House on the back burner. Well, finally got back to me. They scheduled a call with me for this Wednesday. Quick recap, if I haven't really gone into it. Slice House it was started by Tony Gemignani, who's a world famous, world champion pizza maker. I can't remember. He's won like world championships for like 12 times. Anyways, he's been all over TV shows, TV networks, and its franchise has just taken off. But it's a large investment. It's a full service restaurant, right? That means you have waiters, waitresses, you have a hostess, you've got a bar, right? Serving wine, beer, you name it. You need a chef. The food is built from scratch. I actually didn't realize that it was built from scratch. So your dough is made every day, right? Your ingredients are delivered and chopped up every day. Nothing is frozen. Nothing is shipped like that. So anyways, it's a big operation. This is the one where we're talking probably California, minimum $1 million build out, probably close to 1.2. So it's a much, much bigger investment, but the revenue is much, much higher than some of these other businesses. So it's a much larger investment. I think it's a much more complex organization, company to run with so many employees. And, for people that have been in the restaurant industry, assuming you have to be in there working, then, it's a lot of hiring. It's a lot of rehiring. You've got people perhaps not showing up. So, especially if you don't have your chef and or your general manager. This is for sure something where you're going to want a manager, someone with, restaurant experience that knows what they're doing. So it's a much bigger operation, much more complex, like I said, and the cost is a lot higher. But the revenue and the profit margins are a lot nicer. So it's something that I want to consider. Now here's the curveball. Meeting was scheduled for Wednesday, and Jazzy and I jump on the call. And guess what? I'm sitting there with the guy that's the franchise developer. He's got another peer of his on the call, and 5 minutes in, they're like, yeah, no, the guy that we're supposed to be having this meeting with, he can't make it. They're working with another store that was recently opened. That takes priority. So I'm like, okay, on the one hand, yeah, no, I get it. The reason it's been a little bit slow has generally been because they're opening so many stores and they want to be supportive of the people that have already, of course, signed agreements and have invested their money. And I haven't invested anything. So of course they're going to take precedence. I like that. So they said, all right, sorry, we'll reschedule. And I don't think I did it in a bad way per se, but I was pretty much like, look, you guys have been pretty slow, right? This is not the only concept I'm exploring here, and so look, like, let me know if you guys aren't interested. That's okay. I totally get what you guys are doing. You guys have a lot of business you got to work with, but also, I'm working pretty quickly through some of these other concepts, so it'd be good to know if there's some sort of a timeline we can try to stick to. And he goes, all right, I'll get back to you. So then he scheduled the next call for Thursday. That was yesterday. And I'm like, okay, can't remember. Let's just say 2 o'clock, same time. Jazzy and I jump on the call. That screen had like 12 boxes on it. And guess who's sitting there right in the middle? Tony himself. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I don't know if I wanted that, right? Now there's some additional pressure here. Anyways, they basically had every single executive, everyone from the corporate exec management team, including Tony, the founder himself, sitting there, and they started asking a bunch of questions. So that was fun. Similarly here, I think I did pretty good. I've gone through so many of these conversations now. This is one of those where had I not spent a lot of time having all these conversations with the other franchises, yeah, I'd probably be sort of caught by surprise and maybe it wouldn't have gone as well. But either way, I was able to kind of share all the things and answer all the questions that they had. And, I had a bunch of questions on my own, and it was a good 45, 50-minute call. Tony himself was like, they asked me about my restaurant experience. And I talked a little bit more about the friends that I have that are restaurant owners and some of the experience we have. And he's like, what friends? Because I mentioned Walnut Creek. And so I name dropped the restaurant that one of my really good friends is the owner of. He's like, oh, I know that. And then Jazzy commented on a second restaurant that they just bought and said, oh, yeah, they just bought this one a few months ago and I'm managing that one. They go, oh, we know that one too. Our contractors to build out our restaurant helped remodel and build out that one too. Oh, interesting. And I could see Tony kind of like, oh, like maybe they know a little bit. Anyways, so jumped off that call pretty quickly after that. I got a text from the guy I was working with, and they said, hey, look, man, hey, you got a minute? Quick debrief. Jumped on. That guy went straight into sales mode. He was like, hey, that went great. Oh, yeah, I'm waiting for the full debrief and whatnot. Crap. That reminds me, I think he called me today and I didn't get back to him. Anyways, I was dealing with the FCI stuff, so I'll have to ping him after this. But going through that, it was good. And seeing all of them there and getting that full understanding of like, no, they're 100% supportive. The fact that all of them jumped on and the way they talked about it, like they're all a big family. These are not. And the difference here is with FCI and Pertec, these are like well-established brands. They're going 30, 40 years. They've brought on and hired in executives and CEOs from like other large established brands as they build these out. It's a multi-million, potentially billion-dollar organizations where, connecting with Slice House, you could see it. Like this is a team of friends that, got started together. They all got a lot of really, really good experience, but they all know each other. They haven't just hired in random people off the street. And they really work well together, and they talk a lot about how they support their people, and they're all invested. And so we got a pretty good, comfortable feeling out of that too. So last night I kind of added them back into my little rubric, and also kind of spent a little bit of time on just side-by-side comparisons, specifically around the financials. And it's going to be a tough one, right? It's that one definitely. Profit margins are really good. The revenue is really good. But like I said, super complex, big-time investment. It's a restaurant space, right? So it's open, 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. And one other thing too with them, it's from the time you sign an agreement, because it's such a big operation, it takes about a year to get that restaurant open. And so that is a much longer timeline that I think I'd want to work with, but I totally get it. Whereas with FCI, with them already having the office building and everything they're telling me about, man, they're talking And by the way, I should have mentioned this. Next week is what's called discovery days. All franchise organizations have discovery days. That is, once you are essentially approved, when they say that you are a good fit and they're comfortable with awarding you a territory, then they invite you to Discovery Day. Discovery Day is when you get to meet the entire executive team, or at least most of the people, including the CEO. It's usually not in a one-on-one, could be depending on if it's a smaller franchise. Um, but with FCI, it's a lot of different probably people in my same position that are going through that process. We're going to be there together. It'll be some sort of a group call. They used to fly people in. People used to go to corporate live. I did that when we had our franchise float spa. Before we would go visit corporate, we went to two different franchises and visited their corporate locations. Since the pandemic, at least with FCI, they made them remote. I think a lot of people like it. It's less of a cost. They're still getting a very good experience overall. So I will have back-to-back discovery days. Sounds like it's about 5 hours on Wednesday and 5 hours on Thursday. So that will be very, very interesting. But back to the timeline, they're basically telling me like, hey, look, your grand opening should be September 1st. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty quick. So something else that's pretty good that they got going for them. All right. Like I said, I'm trying to keep an open mind. But FCI, I like the timeline. I like the savings. I like the low investment. And I like the office manager there and the support of having someone that's been in the business for a long time to help out from the ground up. So feeling good about that, but we'll see. Got the Pertec call on Monday. Um, all right, let's try to get into some sort of a deep dive here, right? I think I mentioned that a few people have asked about franchises in general. A couple of people were actually surprised at how rigorous the process is. So I figured what I can do is, and I'll probably do this over a few episodes. I don't think there's any need for me to get into the end of this process since I haven't gone through the end. And again, a lot of this is me sort of sharing, real time what's happening. So um, I'll space it out, and maybe today, even though I've probably spoken a lot already, I'll see if there's a way to get caught up quickly to where I am. So let's see. There are 8 critical steps in the franchise process, and I'll quickly maybe run through it on a high level, and then I'll just, like I said, I'll go a little bit deeper here on maybe the first two, and then I'll continue to pick that up. So the first one, the first step here is it's the self-assessment, right? This maybe isn't so much part of the franchise. It's not part of the franchise process, but they would say that anyways. This is your own understanding of your capabilities, your goals, and your fit for franchising, right? Like you're not going to want to go and reach out to a franchise organization and have calls with them if you don't think you're ready. Like that's the first call. Usually it's a 15-20 minute call, and they'll filter you out real quick if you don't have goals set up, if you can't convey what your end state is and what you're trying to do and why you want to go the franchise route, right? Step number 2, it's research and selection. This is actually how do you evaluate, how do you find these different franchise opportunities? You know what? Maybe I should have looked it up. Maybe I'll do it the next time. I've heard there's like over 4,000 franchises in North America, or maybe just in the US alone. That is a lot to try to filter through, right? And of course, there's a lot that are very, very similar. So, for example, the ones that everybody knows or should know, McDonald's, right? That's a franchise. But so is Burger King. So is Taco Bell, right? So burger restaurants, fast food restaurants, there's a ton of them, right? Those are franchise, right? Coffee, same thing. Starbucks, that's a franchise, right? So going through and trying to find the ones you want. If you already know someone that has one, if you see one and you come across something, that's an easy way. For me, I didn't really know. I think Slice House was the one that I knew of, so I reached out to them. As Jazzy and I were going online and searching, I think Jazzy, I mentioned this before, Jazzy filled something out, and I got an email from a franchise consultant. That's who I'm working with now. They've been great. From my understanding, uh, they don't represent all 4,000. They have a book, right, of franchises that they work with. And the person that I'm working with mentioned that they only work with about 200 franchises. So that means if I'm interested in something, for example, Slice House, that's not a part of their book. She can't speak to them. She can't represent them. Is there a benefit to working with a franchise consultant? Of course, there's probably plenty. but are there some drawbacks? So perhaps, yeah, could there be some franchise opportunities out there that I'm not even aware of because they're not part of my consultant's book and I didn't go out and find them on my own? Probably. Do I have all the time in the world to go evaluate 4,000 franchises? Probably not. Could there be a way of filtering something down to say, well, I don't have to look at 4,000. Why don't I just filter by what I want? Yes. But I would say this with both FCI and Pertec, both of those were introduced to me by the franchise consultant I'm working with. And I guarantee you, there's zero chance I would have picked up on those. I would have even given them a second chance had she not walked me through why she thought they would be great fits for me based on the conversations that I had already had with her. So I 100% believe that getting the right franchise consultant is probably a pretty smart move. And I told her about Slice House too. So it's not like, oh, you can't go your own way and find other things. I probably wouldn't recommend working with multiple franchise consultants. That feels a bit icky. But it's just because you have one doesn't mean you have to go with what they're recommending. If I don't like the ones that she recommends, she'll go find other ones, right? She's got a bunch that she's working with. So, and then you get to the third step. This is due diligence. That is essentially the step I am in now. So I'll come back to this one in 1 second here, but step 4 is it's the financial preparation. This is like actually getting all your finances in order, especially if you're going to get a loan, right? Then 5 is legal review, right? This is where, and by the way, the financial preparation, the due diligence, and the legal review, this is kind of where you are at some point in there, you're signing an actual agreement. You're doing the legal review probably before you sign, so you know what you're getting yourself into. If you have your own lawyer that can review it with you, that would be amazing. You want to be financially prepared, so hopefully you already got a lot of that out of the way, but you definitely want to make sure you have your finances lined up, right? You should know what the process is before you get to the point where you sign an actual agreement. So due diligence, actually, let's go back. So after legal review, there's location and setup. Assuming you signed the agreement with the legal review, now there's location and setup, you're pressure testing the territories, making sure all of that stuff lines up, right? With FCI, I don't have to do it. I had those conversations already with Slice House and Pertec. That's how we found out that FCI wasn't available in Fresno to begin with. Step number 7, you have your launch and operation. That is grand opening, right? Like that's it. You're set up, and then the last step, it's the growth and the development. A lot of that stuff is actually what happens after you're open, and hopefully most of these franchises they should have a strong peer network where you're able to tap in and work with all of the other owners and really get help from them and understand what works really well and what doesn't, right? Let's get back to due diligence. Oh man, I just checked the time. I've been talking for 37 minutes. Sorry. I will try to wrap this one up and maybe I'll spend some more time on it next week as well, since that's the stage I'm in right now. This is super, super, super important. Perhaps one of the most important pieces. Up until this point, up until you get to due diligence, you're working with what they call franchise developers. Those are sales guys, right? It's their job to get me to be as interested as possible in these businesses and get me to keep moving through that process, right? Until I sign that agreement. It is 100% sales, right? Some of the things I'm hearing in terms of like the revenue, the ramp, right? They're really focusing on which owners are doing really, really good. They're probably not spending a lot of time focusing on some of the ones that are not doing so good. I've talked about the FDD or the franchise disclosure documents quite a bit. In there, by law, they also have to share how many locations have shut down. Now, it's not historical, so those FDDs are not going to go back 10 years. I believe they have to include the last 3 years. So in the FDDs I'm looking at, it's going to say, were there any terminations, any resales, any closures in the last 3 years? They're usually listed by state. And then, of course, you can have those conversations with the franchise developer. But anyways, they're doing a sales job and they're telling you everything is just great, right? Due diligence is where they have to provide you, they don't have to, maybe they do, but they're supposed to provide you with phone numbers of other owners that are up and running that you can connect with. This is where you will do all of your pressure testing for the most part, right? You look at the FDD, everything in there has to be true. The FDD is going to cover the cost of the business as well as expected revenue, right? It doesn't get into the details sometimes of, well, what if I just want to know the cost of a specific state? What if I want to know about people that ended up having to get additional cash to infuse in the business 6 months after they started because they started with too little, right? What about the marketing? Does the marketing actually work, right? What about the support from corporate? Are they actually doing what they said they were going to do? All that stuff, the only way to get all the real information is due diligence, and that is you're calling these owners and you're talking to them and you're asking them all the tough questions. So with Pertec, I've already done 10 separate calls, 1 hour each. That's 10 hours of just talking to these owners and asking them all the tough questions, right? I've got a laundry list of questions. If anyone's interested, I can send you, but you can also probably use AI or just go online and you're going to be able to find all the questions, right? But you're really asking them really tough questions. With FCI, I've now completed 5 calls. So I've had 5 calls. Each one went 1 hour long. All of them really, really good. Same thing with Pertec. All of the calls really, really good. The one thing that I'm seeing consistent across both of those concepts is, be prepared to spend way more money than what corporate is telling you, what the FDD is telling you, right? There's a lot of maybe not so much unexpected expenses. It's just if you are not tracking in the right way that corporate wants you to track, then corporate might tell you, and that might not be in the FDD. Like break even might not be in the FDD. When you become profitable, it can't be in the FDD because profitable to one owner is very different than what it is to somebody else, especially if somebody has an SBA loan that they're paying back and someone else doesn't, right? What if some owner is taking a big salary, so they're not profitable, but another owner isn't taking a big salary, then it's easier for them to get profitable, right? So there's many reasons for why some owners are going to be more profitable and or not be profitable and or get to a break even situation faster than others. Those are the questions that you generally want to ask. And I do, right? I get in there and I go, hey, did you end up spending way more money? Or how much money did you spend? What's your salary? What's your expected revenue for year one? Right? You're asking all these questions. A lot of them really are around the money, right? You want to make sure you're protecting your money. And also, right, some of the stuff around, if you had to do this all over, would you do it again? Anyways, these are things you can find out on your own. Probably some of these questions are pretty basic. I'm just mentioning it because from both FCI and Pertec, they all had nothing but good things to really say. Now, getting into a little bit more about why franchising and franchising in general, the one thing that is super consistent across the board from all the owners, and this is something that I would tell anybody, and that's something I have to tell myself too, you got to be really aware that if you want to be a business owner, it's likely not going to be easier than maybe having another job. It's probably going to be way harder. And then some people think that, well, that's why you go franchise. If you go franchise, somebody else has already built that business for you, right? And then you're just paying the cost of using their brand name. And then you're paying fees to be able to have them do the work. That is the biggest misconception. And that's ultimately one of the biggest reasons why so many franchise owners fail is they think that they can just pay to get that franchise business and then that the franchise is going to do all the work for them. No. And I think I shared this maybe last time too. The easiest way a lot of people would talk about this, and it's the same view that I have, is yes, you're going to get to use that brand, right? And that there's a lot of value in being able to use that brand. And with that brand comes a lot of experience, right? That's where corporate will likely know what to do and what not to do. That's their experience. So they're going to tell you what you need to do and what not to do. They're not going to do it for you. They're going to tell you what you need to do. You still need to do the work, right? Now, how to do it. They're going to tell you how to do it, right? You could tell somebody like, hey, you got to go hit that nail with a hammer. That's great, but where do I get the hammer? So corporate would also provide you with all those tools. They have a lot of teams in a house that has all the promotional, the branding, the advertising material. You still got to pay for it and they'll send it to you, but you got to do the work. You got to get out there, do the branding, do the advertisement, right? You got to be willing to spend the money on the advertisement, right? Corporate's not going to go and just spend all the money for you, right? So they'll give you the tools, but you have to use them. So anyways, I think that's the main reason why franchises fail. That's, I think, the main reason of why people would want to start with a franchise. That was one of those questions that the senior VP from FCI asked me today. And I mean, it was pretty easy, right? He asked me like, why franchising? Why not just start a business on your own? And I'm like, what business am I going to start that I don't have any experience in it? Like, what am I going to go sit around and just think something up, right? I've been doing 25 years of recruiting. Am I going to start a recruiting business? 100%. That is not what I want to do. I'm a real estate investor. I don't think I'm going to go start a real estate investing company, right? We have a property management business. I already have that, and it's not that I don't necessarily like that work, but I don't think it's going to scale in the way. And I don't know what the future is going to be for Airbnbs as, counties and cities and or other organizations are trying to, put more rules and regulations in place. It's getting more competitive, right? So I'm really trying to figure out what that next business is. And, when you go franchise, it allows you to have that support, that experience behind you. And I think that's super valuable. And then, of course, the tools are provided. That's really good. But then that final piece is around that support network, right? And that was something that showed up big time in PerTech and FCI, where those owners that are tapping into that peer network, man, they're all talking to each other all day long about what works really well, what they're doing that's a little bit different than what corporate told them to do because it's working better for their territory, and whatnot. But anyways, this is all about the validation, right? The validation phase is talk to the owners, get as much information as you can before you sign that agreement. And I'll tell you this, I don't want to say it's a failure. I got a buddy of mine, maybe I don't know if he's going to watch this, but we went into business together on the float spot with Jazzy, and I think we took it lightly. We were so gung ho about this business, about the concept. We were so sure that it was going to do so well that I think they asked us if we wanted to do some owner calls, and I think we might have called one person, had some loosey goosey questions for them, and they were pretty excited about it. And we said, "Oh yeah, that's great," and we moved forward. Man, if I knew back then what I know today, and I almost imagine too, with all the questions that I have now and the way that I'm treating validation, I don't know if that concept would have passed my sort of today bar. So that was about 8 years ago. So, and again, it's not so much that I have way more experience today per se in franchising. I think it's more so working with this franchise consultant and really, really like my entire career depends on this now. Like my family, everything depends on this next move. So, taking the time to do due diligence, it's huge. So I will continue touching on overall franchising in general, but I think with that, peace.